Hey everyone, so following on from our domain controller video, we're going to get straight into building the file server. So we can see it within the diagram here. It's 192.168.10.10, default gateway and DNS server of the domain controller. We're going to build it, join it to the domain, set the IP address and host name just before we do that, and then set up a folder structure, share it, set permissions, and see what our AGDLP, which is our users, global groups, local groups, and with the permissions set on this folder, see how it interacts with what we set up yesterday with the user going into the global group, then that global group going into the read-only local group. And we're going to set the permissions and ticks relative to those permissions and see what our test user can do. Great, see you there. Cool, as you can see from here, I've got my domain controller with user computers up, and on the right I've got my Windows 10 machine up, back to having a static IP address, and it's able to access the resources from its H drive that we set up on the domain controller. Cool, so that's proven communications between the two. So I'm just going to quickly build the file server. So from our list of servers I've got here, I'm just going to quickly go on file server, get it to the desktop, set the IP address and host name, and then get it to join the domain. Cool. I always click I copied it because that relates to MAC address, and within Windows it resets the GUUID. And here we go. Pull it out and I'm going to go full screen with this one once it's built. I'll come back once we're at the desktop. So we're at the desktop of the file server. I'm going to quickly set the host name and the IP address. So properties, rename this because it's just generic server, and this is going to be FS, and then set the IP address while that's doing it. Restart later. Ethernet change adapter. Obviously I've gone through this before. And 192.168.10.10. Class C subnet mask, default gateway 92.168.10.254, and DNS is going to be 192.168.10.1. And so because it's a server, I'm not going to allow it to have a DHCP allocated IP address because the entries of searching for these sort of file shares is going to need a static IP address, and that's the same with any servers. You don't want them to have DHCP allocated. Cool, so that's now all set. What I'm going to do is reboot this and then join it to the domain. See you in a sec. So we're at the desktop of our file server. We're going to quickly make it join the domain. Once it's settled down from just coming onto the initial logon. And can't join the domain like that, so I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. By going on the computer, scrolling down to rename this computer advanced, even though this was the original menu, as I said earlier, change, domain, and ccsc.lan, sustain the name, and cool. Whoop. So this is a good thing to see. So this is duplicate SID. So because I've got these VMs and I've cloned them multiple times, this is a SID is the same as a GUID. So I'm going to have to SYSPREP this machine. Probably something that's quite good to see. So if I just go SYSPREP, no. So the SYSPREP is located in C drive, Windows. So from Windows we go System32, and then we go down to a folder called SYSPREP. You can do this via command prompt and change directory into it, but I'm just using GUI for now. We click on SYSPREP, we click generalize, so that's going to null the sort of work we've done now. So it's going to null the GUID or the SSID or the SID, the SID. SID is obviously something different. I'm going to do out-of-box experience, and it's going to reboot on completion, and basically we're going to build it as a brand new server. So it's going to allow us to join the domain after this. So once I've pressed OK, it's going to start this phase, cleaning it. I'm going to have to reset the IP address and reset the host name, but it's resetting effectively the GUID. If I can catch it quickly, let's see if I can find it within a registry. So it should be based within a local machine. That's a local machine. Security, I think. System, Windows, software, Microsoft. Security. Microsoft. Crypto. There we go. So it's based within, so the GUID, weirdly enough, I've had this issue before, so local machine, Microsoft, crypto, and we can see within here we've got a machine GUID and it's auto-generated. We can delete that and it'll allow it to come back. That's one option, but as a safer option, you sort of, especially with virtual machines, but easier off just full on SYSPREPing the machine, which is going to reset everything anyway, and then we're going to come back to a very general machine. Going to have to create a user account probably, IP address, host name, and then reattempt to join it to the domain. And once we're at that point, then we should be jumping in fine. We'll get it to the desktop and see where we end up. I'm quite excited. This is slightly unplanned, but to be expected when I start copy and pasting machines. And even when I say copied, it should have done this, but there we go. So now it's probably going to go through the build phase again, so I'm going to have to apply for insert sort of a new local user domain. So I'll pause the video and then come back to it when we're ready for some interaction. So as you can see, it's brought us back to a blank server, so we'll just get this quickly built. So UK keyboard, just for our setup, because obviously US switches the @ sign. Read the agreement and accept, and then administrator and the local administrator password, and you know what it's going to be. All good stuff, and finish. So that should boot. It will say welcome, and this can take a little minute. Once we're at the desktop, then that's when I'm going to set the username and password and the IP address. Back in a sec. So this is the initial boot. Got to the desktop quickly enough, and it actually probably took about 3-4 minutes really just to set it up post running the SYSPREP command, and then we'll get to the desktop in a moment. So I've just changed sides so you can actually see me set the IP address like on before. So I've said yes to network discovery, especially for a file server, we want it to be discovered. Set the IP address. Oh, no, I don't want to rename it. 192.168.10.10. 192.168.10.254 and 192.168.10.1, and I'm surprised I didn't get any of the IP addresses wrong. We can validate on exit, that'll take a little minute, and then we can go rename. That's doing that. Right click, properties, and rename this PC, and we can go FS. Next, and that'll want a reboot. So once it's rebooted, we'll come back and join to the domain. Brilliant. See you. So let's go log in and join to the domain. PC, right click properties, scroll down, and it seems like I know what I'm doing now. Oh, I can even do it up there. change domain csc.lan. And the nervous moment. Did it press cancel? Oh no, we're in. Good. Right, so the GUID got reset as a part of that process for SYSPREPing. Brilliant. You don't need to do it on Linux, it's just a Windows thing. Every time we sort of copy and paste a Linux box, it sort of does it for us, but with Windows we have to deal with that GUID issue. So when I build the web server later, I'll show you another way around it through the registry. Cool. So we can close that, restart, and then once it's restarted, I'm going to log back on as the administrator, not a user because it's a server, and then I'm going to create a bit of a folder structure and set permissions. Cool, see you in a sec. So logging on as the administrator, I'm just going to create a folder structure, and within. So instead of creating just a standard folder structure within the C drive and sharing it, also because that's slightly dangerous, that's where the operating system is and you're giving people full access, I'm going to do it within the server manager and create a RAID partition, or even just segment my drive, and it will just quickly cover that, especially considering it's file server. It's good to talk about storage. So if we go to server manager, let that settle in for a minute, and we're going to go manage, or tools and computer management. We should see here, this is sort of like an old flavour of it, and within disk management we should be able to see our C drive here. So we've currently got 50 gigs free of space. We're using quite a bit of it for storage. So at the minute we've got 50 gigs free, yeah, that's right, with a capacity of 60. So I'm going to create this into a dynamic disk and then segment it, and which will allow us to actually use this. So I'm just going to go. So I've just shrunk the C drive area. So by going shrink volume and then shrinking that down from 50 gig to 30. So I've now got a separate unallocated area of 30 gig. I can go new simple volume and create it. So I'm going to split that in half. So I'll make that 15 and give it a drive letter. So I'm going to give it a P drive, or S drive for storage, that sounds better. Move on next, give it a name and give it storage for our files. We don't want file compression, but we want to perform a quick format. NTFS, new technology file system. Bigger will support bigger volumes, whereas FAT32 doesn't really support anything beyond a gig. Especially FAT32 doesn't allow permissions to be set, so it's pretty much a flat open play area. So we want permissions to be set, so we're going to quickly configure this 30 gig, and we're going to new another one for just to see what we can do with it, and we're going for P for programs maybe. I think we'll see what we can do with that later. Cool. And what we can do is show you within this PC, we can see the S and the P drive have now appeared. So I'm not going to share the actual S drive as a whole, because that's bad practice. It naturally is shared. I just want to show you one little trick. So each drive on each server, providing it's attached to a domain, is actually shared. So if I just quickly go into my domain controller, I've got my server, which will currently sat in computers. If I just refresh that, so that's where my file server sat. Not necessarily good, but I'm just going to reach into that and reach into the S drive from a distance. So if I go FS, and then, so at the minute, if we're reaching into the files server, which is called FS, it should appear, but there'll be no shared files. Whereas if I go $, where it's a hidden share for this drive. So we should be reaching back, providing it works, into the file server. Obviously, I think I haven't allowed network discovery. Network discovery is turned off. Let's try that again. Oh, is it turned off on my file server? 2 seconds. Let's have a little look. Yep, turned off. So if I turn it on, so it's going to allow that sharing. So our S drive is here. I'm just going to create a little new file just so we can prove we're reaching to it. Open up my domain controller. Let's give it another go. So we've reached into our file server and we've accessed the S drive as a whole. It's a bit of, I suppose, magic in the background that each drive is shared secretly with $1, so it's hidden. Whereas if I go just totally to my file server, there's nothing shared on it. So it's a hidden share. So that's a little bit of beneficial knowledge, I think. So what we're going to do is I'm going to delete this and new folder. I'm going to call it test folder, and within here I'm going to create a test document, test doc, and on this share I'm going to apply full control on the share, but actually restrict it down to a group. So the share's going to have full control, but I'm going to lock it down with permissions based on the local group. So if I go right click, properties, share, I'm going to share the way we did last time, so advanced sharing, call it test folder, but I'm not wanting to hide it, so there's no $. We can limit the amount of people logging on as well, and everything like that. So apply OK, and apply an OK. That's good, so that's shared, and close. Then within this folder I'm going to go security, and the users at the minute have read and execute. So I'm going to edit this. I'm going to get rid of users. Remove. Okay, I'm going to take ownership of it. So advanced users, read and execute, remove. Yep. It says we're unable to do so because of inherited rights based on the permission set on the storage drive. So if I disable inherited rights, remove all inherited rights permissions for the objects below, apply an OK, so that's now been removed. Administrators is still in there, so that's very good. Now if I go edit, add, I'm going to add LG, I'm going to add both local groups. And because we're logged on to the local administrator for the file server, can I add them both in? It looks like I can. I'm going to set the permissions based on the name, which sort of alludes to it. So that's got read-write access, and this has got read-only. So read-only is generally read-only there. So read and execute as a permission is about executable files. So it doesn't allow us to run any executable files within here, but we can open up documents. So if I apply to that, we're looking good. I'm going to add in domain users as well, just to make sure we've always got inherited rights. So check. Oh, there we go. So I'll add in administrators, and we're good to go. Cool. And OK to that. We shared the test folder, so we should be able to access it. I'm going to log off and log on as my Windows 10 on my Windows 10 client as my test user, and we added them into the read-only group before, so we shouldn't be able to write into that file, but we should be able to open it. So if I jump on my Windows 10 box, which is sat here, I'm not gonna bother restarting it because the permissions should be immediately set actually and take effect. It's not like group policy, but if I reach in. So obviously because this is local, I can't see, it's not shared, but we can share that as a part of group policy. I'm going to access it through a share. So if I go FS and hit enter, we can access it, and we're allowed in because we've got read only, and we can open it because we've got read only. Now if I save it, we shouldn't be allowed to save. So it's not saying over the top, it's asking us to save a new document. And if I even try save this as test.doc123, we shouldn't be allowed to write into that area because we haven't got permissions. We haven't got write permissions into the folder. So the folder is sort of holding us back. Brilliant. So that proves we've got read-only access. I'm just going to chop our user or our global group into the read-write. So the permissions should be refreshed, but without logging on or off. So I'm going to leave our Windows 10 machine there. On the domain controller, switch our user who's in the global group. So if I go test user, go into test user, go member of. So we're in global group, and if I change member of and remove this read only, yep, and LG and add this user into read write, it's sort of, I've done this naming convention so it's sort of a lot easier to see and clearer to explain really. So okay, and now if I jump back onto our Windows 10 machine and access, whoop, I should be able to create a new file here. Can I? Might need to log off and log on. We'll test it. Control S. No, not letting me overwrite it. So don't save. So I'm going to log off and log on for the change to take effect. Reboot might be a lot easier. So as soon as I'm back to desktop, I'll reopen FS and we can see if we make the changes. So if I go onto our Windows Explorer, hit the file server, go on folder and try create a new file. As you can see there, I've done a test already, and that allows us to write to it. Let's see if we can exchange, like save it on top, close it, reopen it, so we can overwrite documents. But the issue that we can't do is we can't delete because we can't modify anything. Brilliant. So modify permissions allows you to change the folder structure, but delete and also change the permissions, but doesn't allow you to assign full control to anyone. Brilliant. So that's what modify permissions does, that we haven't assigned to anyone. Brilliant. So thanks very much for watching the construction of the file server. A folder, we shared it. We did it on not RAID. We only set a partition, which was RAID 1, really, which is simple. And then cool. And then we built it, shared it, and set permissions and talked about them. And we also covered SYSPREP, which was accidental on purpose, discovered how we SYSPREP'd AVM. We're going to now move on to the IIS web server and hosting our own web page internally on our own intranet, I suppose. Thanks very much for watching.